There are moments in history when a culture begins to feel restless, when the ground beneath a society seems to shift, and when the air itself feels charged with expectancy. We live in such a moment now. You sense it, I sense it, families sense it. And what we're sensing is not merely political turbulence or economic instability. It is something deeper, something at the level of the soul of America. Something big is about to happen in this country, not because pundits predict it, but because the very patterns of human nature, the very architecture of the human brain, and the very laws of spiritual and cultural renewal point inevitably toward it. As someone who has spent a lifetime studying both the sciences of the mind and the mysteries of the spirit, I can tell you with certainty that societies, much like individual people, experience cycles. They rise to strength, they grow complacent, they fall into disarray, and then, if there is courage, they rediscover their roots and rise again. Our neural pathways work in a similar way. The brain is plastic, meaning it constantly reshapes itself according to habit. And when a person falls into destructive patterns, those neural grooves deepen until change feels nearly impossible. Yet with one decisive act, with one powerful shift in focus, the brain can begin to rewrite itself. That is true of the individual, and it is true of a nation. When I look at America today, I see a people caught between despair and yearning. Rates of anxiety and depression are skyrocketing, especially among the young. The data is undeniable. The CDC reports that over 40% of young adults in recent years have struggled with persistent sadness or hopelessness. At the same time, we have never been more connected technologically. Yet studies show that despite thousands of friends online, Americans report feeling lonelier than ever before. Loneliness, neuroscientists remind us, has the same physiological impact on the body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Think about that. Loneliness corrodes the immune system. It inflames the brain. It shortens lifespan. And yet here we are, more connected than at any point in history, yet more isolated. But here's the paradox. Precisely when people feel isolated, precisely when they hit rock bottom, the conditions are ripe for breakthrough. Think of the recovering addict who finally admits that he cannot fix himself alone. Think of the patient whose diagnosis shatters denial but simultaneously unlocks the courage to fight. Neuroscience has shown that the greatest growth in the brain occurs when old circuits collapse and new ones must form. This principle of neuroregeneration mirrors what is happening in America right now. We are being stripped of illusions, confronted with truths we have avoided, and invited, whether we like it or not, into transformation. Now, I'm not speaking of transformation in a shallow sense. I am not referring to another electoral cycle or another swing of the pendulum in Washington. That is the surface level. What I am talking about is a deeper tectonic movement, a cultural, spiritual, and moral reawakening that is stirring beneath the surface. History bears witness that such moments do not come when people are comfortable. They come when people are desperate. When the old ways no longer work, when even cynics whisper to themselves, there must be something more. Do you know that in the human brain, crises often act as catalysts for creativity? Researchers at Stanford once studied individuals in highly stressful situations and found that, paradoxically, the stress pushed them to find solutions and connections they had never seen before. The very breakdown of the old patterns gave birth to new insight. And that's exactly what I see happening in our country. Our educational system is faltering, yet young people are seeking truth more earnestly than before. Families are under strain, yet millions are rediscovering the need for bonds deeper than convenience. Political systems disappoint, yet communities are finding power in grassroots movements of service, solidarity, and faith. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I was working with a young man who had nearly given up on life. He was bright, articulate, but his world had collapsed through addiction and betrayal. He came into my office with shoulders slumped and eyes hollow. He said, "There's nothing left." And yet, it was precisely that emptiness that became the soil for change. Over months, as he rebuilt his routines, as he learned to discipline his thoughts, as he connected with people who lifted him rather than dragged him down, his brain began to literally rewire. MRI scans confirm that when people change habits, when they practice gratitude, prayer, and meditation, the neural density of their frontal cortex increases. Hope is not an illusion. It is written into the fabric of our biology. And as I watched him slowly rise, I realized this is not just the story of one person, it is the story of nations. America is in that same posture, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, tired of empty promises. But emptiness is not the end. Emptiness is the invitation. Something big is about to happen, not because we have engineered it, but because human beings cannot live indefinitely without meaning, without transcendence, without love. The soul revolts against emptiness, and the revolt is beginning. Science affirms this truth. Viktor Frankl, the great psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, taught us that human beings can endure almost any suffering if they have a why to live for. Lose the why and despair sets in. But here's the mystery. When people rediscover meaning, when they connect to purpose beyond themselves, resilience explodes. Studies from Harvard's longitudinal research on adult development show that the single greatest predictor of health and happiness is not wealth, not fame, not even physical fitness. It is relationships of meaning rooted in trust and love. That, my friends, is the soil of renewal. And so as I look at America, I do not despair. Yes, I see the data. Yes, I know the fractures, but I also see the possibility. I see the truth that even in our darkness, the human spirit is straining toward the light. Something is stirring. Something is coming. Something is breaking through the crust of apathy, of cynicism, of despair. And when it breaks through, it will not be small. It will be something big, because it is not simply political, not simply social, but existential. Will be the awakening of a people to the fact that meaning matters more than comfort, that truth matters more than popularity, that love matters more than power. That is what is on the horizon, and if you listen closely, not with your ears only, but with the depths of your heart, you can already hear it rumbling. Would you like me to continue from here into the next section of the keynote, building the long 35K, 40K script? He said, I continue. ChatGPT said, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about something big on the horizon, we must understand that such shifts do not happen in a vacuum. They emerge from countless hidden choices, from the silent movements of ordinary people, from the subtle work of the mind and spirit that at first no one notices. Think of a seed buried deep beneath the soil. For weeks, even months, there is no visible sign of growth. The ground looks barren, and then one day, without warning, a green shoot breaks the surface. But that sudden breakthrough was not sudden at all. It was the result of unseen labor, of roots digging, of cells dividing, of hidden life pushing upward. America is in that hidden stage right now. The roots are moving. The groundwork is being laid. I have spoken with countless young adults in recent years who tell me they are tired of being lied to by corporations, by media, by institutions that promise fulfillment but delivered emptiness. And yet, rather than resigning themselves to nihilism, many of them are quietly searching. They're reading philosophy again. They're experimenting with silence and meditation. They're gathering in small groups to discuss meaning and truth in ways their parents often did not. Some are turning back to faith traditions their grandparents left behind. Others are questioning the very consumerist culture that defined the last half century. This is no accident. Neuroscience tells us that the brain cannot live long in contradiction. When what we know to be true and what we live daily are at odds, dissonance builds. And the brain longs to resolve dissonance, either by numbing itself or by transforming itself. Numbing works for a while, but transformation is inevitable. Consider the epidemic of anxiety among young people. On the surface, it looks like a curse, but anxiety, neurologically speaking, is the brain's way of telling us something is misaligned. It is a signal that adaptation is needed. Just as physical pain signals injury, psychological pain signals misalignment with truth. The surge of anxiety is not merely pathology, it is prophecy. It is the body's way of crying out, we cannot live like this forever. And when a whole generation cries out in this way, it becomes the birth pangs of renewal. History confirms this pattern. The great awakenings in America were preceded by periods of moral confusion and despair. The civil rights movement erupted after decades of oppression and silence. In each case, the despair did not crush the human spirit, it forced it to rise. And so it will be again. What we see as fractures today are actually fault lines preparing for an earthquake of renewal. And when it comes, it will not only shake politics, it will reshape how we think, how we live, how we love. Let me tell you another story. A woman once came to me, utterly exhausted. She had lived her whole life trying to keep up appearances, maintaining the illusion of success, wealth, and control. On the outside, people envied her. On the inside, she was collapsing. One night, she broke down completely and admitted, "I don't know who I am anymore." That moment, painful as it was, marked the beginning of her real life. She let go of the mask. She sought help. She began to serve rather than compete. Slowly, she found a joy she had never known before. That breakdown became her breakthrough. And that is America's story. We have chased wealth and power, technology and speed, fame and distraction. We have built the mask, and now we are collapsing under its weight. But collapse is not the end. Collapse is the chance to find who we really are. Something big is coming, because we cannot live forever in illusion. Science again illuminates this. Do you know that when the brain undergoes trauma, new pathways can form that never would have emerged otherwise? Studies on post-traumatic growth show that many survivors of deep suffering report greater appreciation for life, deeper relationships, stronger spirituality, and a renewed sense of purpose. Not despite the suffering, but through it. America's wounds are deep, but those wounds can become the very channels of grace, the very gateways to new strength. There is also a spiritual law at work here. Human beings are not wired only for survival. We are wired for transcendence. Every culture in history has reached beyond itself towards something higher. When that reaching is blocked, when consumerism, materialism, or cynicism pretend to satisfy, it only intensifies the hunger. Neuroscientists call it the God-shaped hole, a metaphor for the innate longing for transcendence. And when a society tries to fill that hole with substitutes, the substitutes eventually collapse. That collapse is exactly what we are witnessing now. But collapse makes way for rediscovery. It clears the ground for something new. So yes, something big is about to happen, but it will not be imposed from above. It will not come from a single leader or policy. It will rise from within, from the deep recesses of human longing, from the rewiring of the collective mind, from the rediscovery of truths that have been waiting for us all along. And here is the question each of us must face. Will we resist it, or will we join it? Because make no mistake, the change is coming. The tide is turning. The only question is whether we will cling to old illusions or open ourselves to new life. Imagine for a moment if families began to prioritize presence over productivity. Imagine if communities chose solidarity over division. Imagine if young people, instead of drowning in distraction, found joy in purpose. These are not pipe dreams, they are within reach. And the brain itself confirms it. When habits shift, when focus changes, when the mind is trained toward gratitude, compassion, and truth, the entire structure of thought transforms. What we imagine, we can become. The human mind has the astonishing ability to shape reality. Studies show that visualization activates the same neural circuits as actual experience. Athletes who visualize training show measurable improvements even without physical practice. If this is true of sports, how much more is it true of a culture that begins to imagine a better way of living? If America dares to imagine truth, compassion, and meaning again, those circuits will fire, those habits will form, and the culture will reshape itself. But here is the warning. Imagination can also destroy. If we keep imagining only fear, division, and despair, we will build it into our brains and into our society. This is why what happens next matters so deeply. Something big is coming. But whether it brings renewal or ruin depends on what we choose to imagine, to practice, to embody in these critical years. And so I say to you, prepare yourselves, not in fear, but in hope. For the ground is shifting, and the seed is about to break through the soil. Life has a way of convincing us that the battle is endless, that the weight pressing down on our shoulders is ours alone to carry. You wake up some mornings and the very first thought in your mind is not hope, not gratitude, but worry. It's that gnawing, corrosive feeling that something's about to collapse, that you're not ready, that the mountain ahead is too steep. And yet here's the truth that most of you don't let sink into your bones. The battle you're obsessing over has already been won. Not because of your intelligence, not because of your money, not because of your hustle alone, though those matter, but because there's a power greater than you that has already cleared the path. The tragedy is that you keep staring at shadows as if they're walls, when in reality, the walls are already torn down. Think for a moment about the human brain. From a neuroscientific standpoint, worry is the most expensive currency you can waste. Worry hijacks your prefrontal cortex, the very part of your brain designed for decision-making, planning, strategy. The amygdala, the alarm bell, fires constantly when you dwell in anxiety, drowning out your ability to see clearly. It's like driving a Ferrari with the handbrake on. You were built with extraordinary capacity, but you handicap yourself when you obsess over every possible negative outcome. And science backs this up. Studies have shown that 85% of what people worry about never actually happens. And of the small percentage that does, most people discover they were capable of handling it better than they thought. Yet we hand over hours, days, sometimes decades to scenarios that never play out. That's not just waste, it's self-sabotage. But let's not stay in theory. Let me tell you about a man who lived with worry gnawing at him every day. He was a businessman, young, ambitious, full of ideas. He borrowed money, started projects, dreamed big. But every night he couldn't sleep. His mind was a battlefield of what ifs. What if the banks pulled out? What if his partners betrayed him? What if the market collapsed? That fear didn't just drain his energy, it froze him. He didn't take risks when he should have. He didn't act decisively when doors were open, and slowly opportunities slipped through his fingers. Years later, he looked back and realized something terrifying. None of the disasters he imagined had ever happened, not one. The only thing that destroyed his progress was his own hesitation, fueled by worry. He didn't lose to reality, he lost to imagination. Now contrast that with another story. A woman diagnosed with cancer. Aggressive, fast-moving, terrifying. Her doctors told her the odds were slim, but she decided to see the diagnosis not as a death sentence, but as a test of endurance. She said, "This is not my battle to fight alone. I will do everything I can with medicine, with discipline, with mindset, but the ultimate outcome is already written. My job is to live each day as if victory is assured." That shift in perspective freed her from despair. She showed up to every treatment, laughing with the nurses, comforting other patients, and walking with her head high. And here's the irony, her body responded. The immune system is profoundly influenced by mindset. When you live in chronic fear, cortisol and adrenaline flood your system, weakening your defenses. But when you live with a conviction that the battle is already won, your body fights differently. Today, years later, she's alive, stronger than ever, and when she tells her story, she doesn't say, "I beat cancer." She says, "The victory was already mine. I just had to walk through it." And on this is what most of you don't understand. Worry is an illusion that places you in the role of a victim, when in reality, you were meant to be a warrior. Neuroscience, psychology, faith, they all point to the same reality. Your brain, your body, your spirit are designed not just to endure, but to overcome. When you worry, you're rehearsing failure. When you trust, you're rehearsing victory. And the brain is highly suggestible. It wires itself based on what you repeat. You tell yourself every day that you're not enough, that the obstacles are too great, and your neural pathways strengthen around fear. But if you declare this battle is already decided and I walk in strength, your brain literally changes. Neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to rewire itself, proves that belief and repetition sculpt your reality. Now let me get blunt with you. Some of you sit there with your heads bowed in worry every night, crying into your pillows, scrolling through social media, comparing your life to everyone else's highlight reels. And in those moments, you forget something fundamental. You're still breathing. Do you know what that means? It means you're not done yet. If you were finished, you wouldn't be here. The fact that you still have breath in your lungs is proof that you're not defeated. That breath is not yours by accident. It's a sign that you are sustained, carried, empowered, even when your circumstances scream otherwise. Stop acting like you're losing when you've already been handed the victory. I've studied enough about human resilience to know this. The greatest breakthroughs often come right after the darkest nights. Why? Because when you are pushed to the edge, when you believe everything is lost, that's when you stop clinging to your illusions of control. That's when you finally surrender, not to defeat, but to the reality that you're not the one writing the last chapter. And when you stop fighting shadows, your energy shifts to building, to acting, to moving forward. You stop being paralyzed. And when you stop being paralyzed, momentum builds. Momentum, ladies and gentlemen, is more powerful than talent, more powerful than resources. It is the force that compounds small steps into massive transformation. Look at history. People who changed the world, scientists, leaders, inventors, almost all faced overwhelming resistance. Worry could have crushed them, but instead they understood something profound. Worry doesn't add a single ounce of strength. It doesn't sharpen your mind. It doesn't extend your life. In fact, worry shortens it. Chronic stress is one of the leading causes of disease, cardiovascular issues, autoimmune breakdowns, even memory loss. These are fueled by a mind trapped in fear. And yet, how many of you voluntarily rehearse your own destruction every day in your heads? You think you're protecting yourself by preparing for the worst, but you're poisoning yourself. You don't toughen up by imagining failure. You toughen up by committing to victory. And I'll tell you why this matters on the deepest level. Because your worry isn't just about you. Worry bleeds. It seeps into your children when they watch your face and learn fear instead of courage. It seeps into your workplace when you lead with hesitation instead of conviction. It seeps into your community when you whisper doom instead of declaring hope. You don't carry your worry in isolation. It infects others. But the opposite is also true. Courage bleeds. Conviction bleeds. When you stand up with clarity and certainty, even in the storm, people around you catch fire. They rise. They believe. That's leadership. That's legacy. So when I say stop worrying because the battle is already won, I don't mean sit back and do nothing. I don't mean hide in a corner waiting for a miracle. I mean walk boldly as if the victory is already secured, because it is. You still need to work. You still need to discipline your body, sharpen your mind, act decisively, but you do it from a place of strength, not fear. You do it knowing the outcome is aligned in your favor, not against you. You do it with the audacity of someone who refuses to bow to imaginary enemies. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is heavy enough. Don't add weight to it by carrying battles that aren't even yours to fight. Your task is to move forward, to keep walking, to keep building, to keep trusting. Science confirms it, faith confirms it, life confirms it. The ones who rise, the ones who leave a mark, the ones who truly live, they are not the ones who never face storms. They're the ones who face storms with the unshakable conviction that the storm would not define them, because the sun was already waiting on the other side. And so I say to you tonight, stop worrying. Lift your head, straighten your back, breathe deeply. You are not here by accident. The battle is already won. Walk like it. Live like it. Lead like it. And watch how your life transforms when you finally believe it.